So in the first video, I talked a lot about response, and I tried to explain that, but I wanted to make a video to actually visually show on a graph just how response looks, sounds, and transitions as you change tunings and also different kinds of enclosures. So this is for all these here are for a JL 12-inch W3, and the reason why I graphed this is because when I just built the box for a pair, and so this purple line here is the 6th order that I just built for those. Now, when I made him, it looked like a standard prefab, so if I had to guess, I would say it's probably about 2.5 cubes net and probably tuned in the upper 30s. And so this will give you an idea, this white line here, of how something like that would graph. And if I had have actually built him, say, a ported box, if he didn't have room for a 6th order, I would have built something like this graph here, which is 4 cubes at 32 hertz. And so as I try to explain, you can see how a prefab that is tuned higher has more peak, but how it falls off in the lower frequencies. Whereas if you would tune lower, it's not as loud overall, but it's also a flatter response, and it's going to be much more efficient down low, which means it'll be louder down low. So it's all about your goals. And as you tune lower and lower and lower, you're going to help increase efficiency down here somewhat, but at the cost of upper response and upper peak. So you don't ever want to tune too low when doing a ported enclosure, but you also don't want to tune too high because your ported box is going to be a compromise, and the best way to do it is to tune about 5 hertz above the lowest that you plan on playing down to as far as frequencies are concerned, because you want to have control at those lower frequencies. And if you're playing too far below tuning, you won't have control over your subs, and that can cause them to bottom out. And of course, you don't want that. That'll damage your subs, rip spiders, break leads, all that kind of stuff. And so this line down here is those subs in a sealed enclosure. And so you can have an idea of just how much more efficient a ported enclosure, even a prefab, is over sealed. And a sealed is going to have a nice response. See how smooth the transition is. And that's why people say that sealed boxes, they have really good sound quality and really good punch, and they sound really clean. Well, they do, but they're not meant for output. Ported enclosures, but there again, if you do a correct ported enclosure, you can greatly gain efficiency, but at the same time still have a nice response. You don't have to sacrifice sound quality just to gain output. Now, you can see here, this is a 6th order, and a 6th order is of course 2 ported enclosures in one. It can be parallel or series. The one I built for the W3s was a series tuned, which means that the one enclosure was inside of the other one. One side tuned low, one side tuned high. And the tunings that you choose, the ratio between chambers, all that is going to affect the response curve. But the way that I built his, this is how it graphs here on the program. And so you can see how much greater an output it is overall over a ported enclosure would have been, but also how it plays much lower than his prefab box was playing. So it's kind of gives you an idea. Now, of course, this is a program, this is a tool, and so once you actually physically place an enclosure into a car, this response curve is going to be different inside the vehicle because you're going to have cabin gain, acoustics. It's just like if you took the same pair of subs and the same enclosure, even if you graphed it out here, and you put it into a 2-door coupe, into a 4-door sedan, into a hatchback, into an SUV, into a truck, that same enclosure and same subs will sound different in each vehicle because of the acoustics of that vehicle, but also the natural peak and the natural cabin gain of that vehicle. And if you really want to get super technical, when you're actually designing and graphing out your response for your enclosure, you would take wherever you naturally peak at in that vehicle into account. And so say that you knew that you peaked in the 45 hertz range, 50 hertz, whatever, you could use that to play into, do you want to add to that peak Or do you want to sacrifice some output up here up top and then gain some at the bottom? Because what you lose from the enclosure, you can gain back from your cabin gain. And so that's where knowing your vehicle comes into play as well, as far as response and everything. But so what you do is you factor in, say that you're running a prefab that's going to peak up here around 60 hertz and fall flat down here at 40, 30 is way over here. I mean, look how flat that it falls on its face. So let's say that you have a prefab that's already lacking lows, and then you couple that into a vehicle that is going to peak as well in the 50 hertz range, 45 hertz range. You're going to get really loud in the upper range, but you're going to have nothing down low. And so that's where prefabs tend to fall short. And then what you do is you end up pushing your equipment, your subs, your amp, whatever, harder to make up for this lower output. But there again, you can't change how the box is going to sound. And so then you end up blowing your subs, burning up your amp, trying to make up for this low response that you're just not going to gain. And if you were to, say run a larger amp and increase power, you will gain output, quote unquote, because this response curve is going to stay the same curve. It's just going to increase overall. This entire bandwidth, the bandwidth is going to be the lowest to the upper part that you're covering by your sub. And so the bandwidth is going to stay constant. So if you took away power, it would go down. If you increase power, it's going to go up. It's not going to change the curve. It's just going to change how efficient or non-efficient it is based on power. So it's important to choose the right subs that'll best meet your needs, but also the right enclosure to both fit those subs and also fit the response that you want. And then it's the power that you're giving it is how loud it's going to be across that bandwidth. So hopefully this helps make a little bit more sense about response, how it works, and how your enclosure, depending on the tuning, the type you're running, all that kind of stuff, is going to affect your sound, your efficiency, how it responds, and best meeting your goals.